Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stewart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look. Good evening, everyone, and we're trying to call Larry up on the phone, and we've got kind of an interesting... Hi, Larry. How are you doing?
Hey, Stewart. I'm here.
Oh, good. Good. You never know these days with all the censorship going on and everything else. It's amazing. It's amazing, too, that the people are actually putting up with all this stuff. But they are, and I guess that's just the way it is. Where do you want to start? We got all kinds of news. Have you got anything you want to get off your heart right now for the folks out there?
Well, I just mentioned a new book by Olaf Hage just came out. It's available on Amazon. It's actually written, Olaf Hage, remember, was a French Torah code or Bible code writer that's done a lot of work looking into America and all of that. Well, he's come out with a new book, his last book, because he just passed away, and Tom Mack published this book. It says Velikovsky wrote about planetary encounters in our past. Typhon is our imminent future. And the title of the book is Typhon, the Reaper of Worlds. Really, really an incredible, interesting book. And what it is Olaf Hage studied visits of this destroyer object, which goes under different names. And he found one of the ancient names was Typhon. And very, very interesting data because it really links in with where we're going, and it basically is a case study of 6 civilizations destroyed by this object that would come around, and it is available now for people to know from Amazon.
Yeah, and if you, folks, if you got a copy of the Colburn Bible, it also mentions Typhon. And some of the other books that were written about the destroyer coming inbound all mention a number of the ancients did in fact call it Typhon. It's got a number of names, a destroyer, Typhon, planet of the crossing. It's got a number, Nemesis, that sort of thing. But there's no question that the Bible even talks about it. And somebody sent me a picture, I think it was from England, and several from Canada that definitely show an object beside the sun, but it's not always there. So it makes you wonder exactly, what are we watching? Are we watching planets that are so close to the sun they're being illuminated, but they then travel around because this Typhon isn't close enough yet? And, of course, they kept moving the dates, and then, and then everybody began to mock it, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it is real. It's been here a number of times. In fact, the Solon, who journeyed to Egypt to visit the Egyptians, their wise men, I guess one could call them, and Solon was told that the Earth has been destroyed a number of times by this Typhon, the destroyer, and that it's going to happen again. In fact, it's not just Typhon that does the destroying. The destruction has come from a number of different cosmic events that occur. And, of course, the Bible more or less indicates, Jesus said, through Daniel and Isaiah and Jeremiah, that what is coming is worse than anything that's ever been seen before. So it almost looks, Larry, like what we have is a convergence of things that are coming. And, of course, nobody, Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to mention in this book, it seems like Olaf Hage follows a lot of Velikovsky's information, and he says that his research indicated that Typhon moved in an elliptical orbit around the sun that took approximately 5,125 years for every trip. So I find that interesting, and he did, by the way, he describes this, and of course we know from the Colburn and other descriptions that nobody seems to know what this object really is, but he describes it in his book as something that is star or comet-like.
Yeah, that's what the Book of the Colburn says. It's unlike any other object ever seen, and they didn't know what to call it. It was, you're right, it was kind of like a star, but it wasn't a star. And nobody had ever seen anything like it before, and that's the way the ancients all described it. In fact, it was so bad and did so much damage that it all but eliminated humanity, and then they have to basically start over again. And the Chinese have recorded a lot of that kind of thing. And I've got a book here. It's called, let me see if I got to wear my glasses and getting old. Can't see too well. The Return of Planet X. And this is the one where they talk about, oh, Solon, you Greeks are but children. This is an Egyptian sage. There is no old doctrine handed down among you by ancient traditions or any science which is hoary with age. And I will tell you the reason behind this. There have been, and there will be again, many destructions of mankind out of many causes, the greatest having been brought about by earth fire and inundation, which is, of course, probably a earth flip, as Red Oak called it. And by the way, Red Oak saw the earth turned upside down in his visions that he was shown. So this is really serious stuff, and of course nothing anybody can do about it, but it's kind of interesting that the Bible agrees with all of the ancients. If you just go in and look around, here's one from Pliny the Elder, 1st century. A terrible comet was seen by the people of Ethiopia and Egypt. It had a fiery appearance and twisted like a coil, and it was very grim to behold. It was not really a star so much as might be called a ball of fire. It was not of fiery color, but of blood red. And Isaiah talks about Edom and a blood red. It has a blood red dress, and a lot of experts think that that's probably referring to the destroyer. So, and of course, Native Americans have for a long time insisted. Here's another statement. Well-respected ancient scholars believe that the shifting of the Earth's axis of rotation was brought about by the appearance of a large celestial object. These ancient authors repeatedly mention a terrible comet they called Typhon, which had a bloody appearance in the sky and caused great destruction to Earth, involving plagues, evils, and hunger. And it's all over the ancients, Larry. I mean, they all talk about this.
Yeah. And one thing that he does mention in his book, he mentions basically because of that history of that great destruction, that is why in Asia, when you have a massive hurricane-like destruction coming, they call it a typhoon. It's based on Typhon.
Isn't that interesting? I did not know that at all. That's fascinating. Well, that just goes to verify now, when you read Earth Under Fire, a very, very interesting book, but he's more talking about cosmic waves and huge gravity waves that emanate forth from the center of the Milky Way. He's an interesting scientist, and I think they know this is coming. I think they've known it's been coming for a long time, And I want to get into a few things here on the news because I did hear that an executive order has been issued. This is on, I think, Steve Quayle's site, if I remember right, where they have been more or less silenced about reporting a lot of this stuff. Well, the only reason they would do that is the things around the world are coming much more quickly, and people are going to start to catch on. And I do remember, I can't remember his name now. He's a scientist. Had a YouTube channel and everything. Wrote a number of books. We've even talked about him on the show. McKinney, yes, James McKinney, and he said that they wouldn't they would be silenced. They were ordered to be silent. And I guess the basic reason is they're afraid that the economic system would collapse because people knew when this was coming. You may remember the movie Deep Impact. Remember, they said, yes, you will continue to go to work and there will be price fixing and no, you're not going to gouge your neighbor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because they knew that once the word got out of a commentary impact, that generally speaking, the people would, the whole system would then collapse. So,
yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
And I do find it interesting. Stewart, that today I noted that Holly Deo had posted a post, and they're really warning about earth changes, and at the same time, she is kind of recording information that says that people are just now becoming aware of a food shortage. And she said, even though they act like it's going to be over by September, she said it's only going to get worse.
Well, I've got an article here. It's very, very short, but temperature went down to 37 degrees up in northern Minnesota. Here we are in August. That's close to a frost. That's very close to freezing. I think we are going to have troubles. And even if we got all this corn that's growing now, all we have to have is a very early frost, and that's the end of it. And I do remember the Lord making a comment. I didn't look it up, so I don't know exactly where it is, but he says he's going to smite you with mildew and heat. So mildew was water. And we got all the stuff that was in these granaries that's ruined by the water. So,
well, Stewart, I was just going to inject there real quick, just for your information. And you live up north, but down here where we are, there is masses of water vapor and heated water coming in on the southern coastal areas like Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, all through there. And this is making its way up here recently. It's almost so much water in the atmosphere you can breathe water. It's incredible, the humidities that we're having.
Yeah, and this is going on worldwide. I've got some headlines I collected just before the show about what's really going on worldwide. I did want to make a note. We'll get back to this. The Chinese, for example, talked about how the sun and the stars once rose in the west and set in the east, and how all the changes of the heavenly motions. And I was just reading a report today about people noticing, particularly housewives who've been in their homes for a long, long time, and they know where to put their plants, their flowers and whatnot for the sun. It's coming in different windows than it ever did. And people are noticing that it's all changing. And, of course, the Inuit up north said that the whole northern thing, they use stars to navigate because they don't have a lot of landmarks up in some of the tundra areas. So they use the stars and the sun and the moon to navigate by. It's all changed. It's all changed. And, of course, they're keeping all of this away from the people. before we get going, I wanted to make a little remark here. August 4th, which is 2 days away now, is the date for a 7-day warning for the 9th of Av. So it's kind of interesting. Whether anything going to happen or not, probably not, but we don't know. But just a heads up that if we have a major event on the 4th, look out for the 9th, not necessarily connected to the rapture of the church, but maybe very necessarily connected to war, rumors of war. And I notice Palestine, the Indian-Pakistan situation is once again rearing its head. We'll get into that. So it's Typhon. What is that? The actual name of the book that people should look at?
Yeah, the name of the book is Typhon, Typhon, the Reaper of Worlds. And if you'll remember, Stewart, the Lord told me he identified it. He called it the Destroyer of Worlds, which is basically the same terminology, and it's by Olaf Hage, Olafhage. It's the very last book Olaf wrote just before he died. Now, he has passed away now, and but they can order it. Amazon.com has it up. I just got a copy, and I'm going to do a review of it, and I'll probably later shows read a little bit from it.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, and I think we're seeing, in fact, I know we're seeing the preliminaries, the preliminary waves or ripples, whatever you want to call them, of the approach. In the book of Colburn, it talks about how people at the time did not realize, and I'm talking about the masses of the people, not the people who were really watching and paying attention, because the wise people knew. In the book of the Colburn, it says the wise know where it went, and they know when it's coming back. And folks, you may remember that a lot of things are going on governmental-wise when it comes to moving. For example, a lot of government stuff is moving into Denver. You may remember the Chinese were building all kinds of cities, but they were all on very high ground. Complete libraries have been moved to higher ground. If you remember the movie, I don't know if it was Armageddon or Deep Impact, where they talked about moving artworks and all of that to protect them. They know this is coming, and so they're trying, and we got that seed vault in Norway on very high ground. And there was a university, I believe, in Norway that said that they felt when the polar shift arrived that they would probably end up in a subtropical area. And this seed vault, if you want to call it that, has just about every seed from every nation. They're storing it. They know this is coming, and they are not going to warn the people whatever about it. And nothing anybody can do about it anyway. The only hope we have is that the Lord Jesus Christ will remove his people, but the unbelievers and all that are not going to be removed. They're going to go through most of this, and probably I would say the vast majority will be exterminated anyway. It's very, very interesting. You got nature exterminating humanity. You probably got the fallen angels that will be going around exterminating people. You've got government exterminating people. And humankind just has a problem. What more can you say? All we do is fight war and build weapons of mass destruction. People should have a clue as to what all that means and why it's there, but evidently not. They don't have a clue. I got a headline here talking about preliminary warnings, tsunami warning after a 6.8 quake strikes Indonesia. Have you heard any more about that?
Well, looking at some of the locations of the seismic monitors, that was actually a 7.1 was the first strike, and then there was a couple of 6.8, 6.6, and 6.4 following that. Of course, they didn't make it up on the USGS charts or EMSC. They're holding back, Stewart, a lot of what's happening.
Yeah, again, they don't want the masses of the people figuring out something's going wrong with planet Earth. And all of these things Jesus warned about. He told us all about it, that when you begin to see these things happen, lift up your head because your redemption draweth nigh. I did talk about the reports of the sun not rising or setting where it usually does. Same goes for the moon, folks. And this has been going on now for, what, Larry, 2-3 years, where it shifts momentarily and then it comes back to where it normally should be.
Yeah, right. Stewart, it's almost like there is a odd wobble that comes through every once in a while, and it wobbles that certain direction and then goes back to what it was doing previously. And so that's why a lot of people are seeing the moon and the sun rising in the wrong places. They're seeing their sunlight in the wrong windows. I mean, this is ongoing.
Yeah, and this is exactly what the book of Isaiah chapter 24 talks about, that the earth will wobble. And it starts to oscillate like a top running down, and then eventually, like a top, it flips over. It topples over. And that's a description in Isaiah chapter 24. And the end result is that mankind is as rare as fine gold. And so it really does a number on everybody. Then we have in Indonesia, according to an inside source, presidential gag order in effect on global quake reporting and downgrading and selective sanitation of earthquake activity in the United States. I think that came out of Steve Quayle's site. I don't know exactly where he got that information from. It may not even be his site that said it, but we've heard this before. This is not the first time. Remember when Stan Dale was getting too accurate with his earthquake predictions? And so the Navy took away the stuff he was using to make them? Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't want people to know what's happening. Go ahead.
Something else I've noticed too, Stewart, I'll tell you on some days, when we talk, I'll say there's just not enough earthquakes. There's no pressure being released anywhere in America. And, then we find there was quakes, but they didn't post them. But I've also noticed lately, Stewart, there'll be a number of earthquakes that if I look an hour later, they've been sanitized. They're gone, Stewart. They really happened, but they're gone from the list.
Yep. Yep, they don't want people getting worried about this. Let's see, let me scroll down here a little bit. Here's a prophecy, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the headline is Obama signs order called the extinction of Christians. This is about the return of Obama. Now, a lot of people mock that, and they say, never going to happen. I wouldn't be so sure about that. But anyway, it says, in her dream, all phones started ringing at the same time. Now, this goes in with what we've been talking about, end of days. Everything is starting to go wild when it comes to Earth. Earth changes. Jesus said, watch the stars and the heavens and the moon, and everything is going to start to change. All phones started ringing at the same time. As we were answering, many military vehicles pulled up so fast out of nowhere with multitudes of military people who immediately started shooting and tasering people. They showed no mercy, killing many people. She was amazed by the number of military soldiers because there were more of them than there were civilians. They appeared to be well trained for the event. They were called sentinels, and they were following an order given by Obama, which was called the extinction of Christians. Schools were calling all the parents and telling them to come pick up their children. And so the parents went, but when they arrived, the soldiers were at the school waiting for them. It was a trap. The people saw their children being taken away on a bus, so they started crying and screaming. When they asked where the kids were being taken, they were told they had to go with the soldiers who would take them to the same place their kids were going, but that was a lie. The soldiers were taking the parents to a different place, a concentration camp, a re-education camp. In other words, one of Hillary's Camp Joy things. By the way, folks, you know, Hillary herself said the American people had to be re-educated. They had to go to re-education camps. Lo and behold, the United States Army has a whole thing on re-education camps. The enemy is now within, much more than without. We're being invaded. It's too bad that America has to go down, but it's been in the prophecies for I don't know how many thousand of years that America would be destroyed and totally. It's just eliminated basically, but it's a horrific ending for the vast majority of American people who evidently are only interested in eating their hot dogs, their hamburgers, and watching whatever sports they're addicted to. Anyway, the children were obviously taken to a different place. Here's an interesting comment. This has already been a test run, or there has already been a test run of this program done 4 to 5 years ago in Colorado. Dave Hodges of Common Sense reported on that. I remember that. Do you remember that, Larry?
Well, I do.
So that was a dry run, and even at the time, people were reporting, this looks like a dry run. Anyway, she says the season was cooler weather. Schools were in session, so there would have to be fall or winter. She warned the parents at the school. Now, evidently, she's there in the vision, and she's warning the parents that everyone entering the camps would be required to take the mark of the beast, and those who received it would go to hell, which is exactly what the Bible says. There's a good reason for it. But all those who refused would simply be killed. She saw several groups running to receive the mark. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. And she goes through a list of those people she thought would. And she talks about an RFID chip was only the beginning. Then she says that received a mark. She got a close look at it. Looked like a tattoo of a blazing sun. Now, what's interesting about that is, do you remember Ken Peters in his vision, Larry?
Yeah, I do.
Well, in one of the videos, he shows what he was shown was the mark. That's what it was. It was a blazing sun. Isn't that interesting? That we'd have a verification of this. Anyway, I don't want to get into all that. Here's another headline. I want your comments on this one, Larry. This is interesting. Colossal ancient structures found at Gath connected to the Nephilim and Goliath. A giant of a man may have sprouted from an equally giant-sized city. Evidently, they found the supersized remains of an enormous architectural and fortifications from a new, unexpected biblical era lair of a Philistine city of Gath were unearthed this summer. So, you know, the Lord said, I'm going to prove the Bible is true, so humanity has absolutely no excuse whatever. And, of course, the Bible can be proved mathematically anyway. Absolutely, mankind has no excuse whatever. Here's something, too, Larry. 7 mysterious balls of light changing patterns above Elton Barnes, UK, recorded by an astonished French high school teacher. It was 3, 4, 7, 8 balls of light without any noise, no smoke. They were first appearing like from a new dimension. What do you think of that?
Well, that reminds me, Stewart, of the image I took with my camera. Remember, I took it at night near Mena, Arkansas, and remember there were a lot of what appeared to be balls of light or orbs, plus an object that just kept developing in the photograph. Remember that?
Yes, I do. That was fascinating stuff. There is one explanation for some of this that people may be overlooking. They aren't all UFOs. Well, they are because they're unidentified, but they may well be what is known as earthquake plasma balls. We're heading into a plasma event. And, in fact, the sprites that are being photographed, the vertical shafts coming up from the ground are being photographed now. People are seeing these balls of light dancing around in the heavens. It's indicative of major earthquake movement underground. And it releases energy, which takes the form of plasma balls. Plasma can be very destructive, like lightning. That's nothing but plasma, really. When I was a pilot flying turboprops, particularly, if you were flying at night, you could see what they called it St. Elmo's fire. And it dances around the props, and it dances around your windshields. It's very interesting to watch. It's plasma. And it can be extremely deadly as well. Anyway, kind of interesting that more and more people are witnessing these UFO reports, and they're all reporting the same thing, Larry, balls of light, more than they are elongated cigar-shaped disc or that sort of thing. More and more seem to be reporting these balls of light. Is that possibly indicative that we are headed into some major earthquake activity?
Well, we do know, Stewart, that they're really warning about something in the U.S., especially on the West Coast and possibly New Madrid. They're very concerned about that, and we have a lot of activity going all the way right now from, Chile just had about a 6.6, 6.8 earthquake down there. So we've got big quakes operating up and down the west coast of the entire South America to North America region to Alaska.
Have you heard anything from your friend who senses that sort of thing lately?
Yeah, I forwarded you one 2 days ago. He said that he was picking up frequencies that indicated a big earthquake coming, and then this morning we had the 7.1 major earthquake, Indonesia. So he said, and he said there's going to be more of them.
Yeah, we're heading into bad times, folks, and it's interesting that it's 2019, et cetera, et cetera. It's just something for a heads up. And also famine. We're getting more and more reports that you better
Plus,
stock
Stewart,
up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, Stewart, so you wouldn't forget it. You might want to, we're in that time frame you were talking about and warning about. You may want to mention that black moon that's coming.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, well, it just occurred, as far as I know. It's how do we call this? It's a supermoon, but it's an invisible supermoon. And we just had it very, very rare. What they call would be a mega moon, I guess you could call it. But you can't see it because that's why they call it a black moon. But it's probably a very nasty sign. I think it occurred on the 1st, actually. And a lot of stuff going on. There's another headline, Larry. It has transformed into an ecological disaster. Wildfire smoke traveling east from Siberia has now reached Alaska, the west coast of Canada, and Seattle. And that's just one headline we've got. Something is going on up there. Strange sunsets are being witnessed around the world as the Arctic burns. Worst Arctic wildfires in 10,000 years. Folks, these things are going on all over the world. Flooding, massive flooding, massive heat waves, cold, erratic weather. This is all part of the arrival of the destroyer, Typhon, whatever you want to call it. And mixed with that are the precursor cosmic waves and gravity waves that are coming in from the center of the Milky Way galaxy. Dr. Paul LaViolette talks about that in his book, Earth Under Fire. He's being proved absolutely accurate, and he, in that book, proves that the ancients knew a whole lot more than we ever gave them credit for. In fact, they were far more intelligent, actually, in some ways, than we are even today. We're just finding out some stuff they knew a long, long time ago. A good example of that is the Mayans had a drawing of the black hole in the center of the Milky Way galaxy. We don't even know what a black hole is. Some say it's a massive star. Others say it is truly a black hole. They had a diagram of it. They knew all about it. Now, how did they know all that stuff? But they did. It's like Jesus Christ himself knew all about DNA. He even talked about it. People don't even realize what's in the scriptures. Don't you know every hair on your head is numbered? We only found that out, what, Larry, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
I mean, how did he know that?
Yeah, and also remember the guy named Park that you knew, and I think you may have interviewed him once, but yeah, he was talking about a time that was coming where there would be a lot of magma movement and earthquakes,
Yes, and that's what we're watching. In fact, he traced some of it, and they shut him up real quick. Suddenly he went dark, so to speak. India, getting onto politics and war, India massing 80,000 troops in Kashmir. Pakistan puts Army and Air Force on alert. Earlier this week, the government of India began moving 10,000 paramilitaries into the region called Jammu and Kashmir. They are, in addition to the approximately already 40,000 people or troops. Today, India is deploying another 28,000 to the same area and has Air Force jets in the skies. So what's going on there, Larry? Are we going to have, there was the prophecies that the nuclear war actually begins between Pakistan and India. And then it just accelerates and goes all around the world.
Yeah, I remember that prophecy, and also, if you'll remember, history has shown, and they've actually dug up cities in India that were ancient cities that had been destroyed, they proved, by nuclear explosions. So the nukes started in that region for a nuclear war way back, and they were thinking that possibly those remember the Vermanas they talk about?
Yes.
Flying vehicles and all of that, they thought they had dropped nukes too. And so it could be history repeating itself, but of course, forgotten history.
Well, it's like the Bible says, there is nothing new under the sun. What was, will be again. And that's all we're watching. Remember the golden mirror that they discovered? Well,
absolutely.
What would we call it today? A smartphone? They were able to crack the code.
Absolutely.
Nothing new under the sun. And that was all the way back into Genesis days, from the pictures and everything that they found on that instrument.
That actually tracked back. That actually tracked back to the close descendants of Adam, and they had photographs, images. It operated by frequencies, and it showed pictures and text and all the stuff that we see today. And what's so interesting, I talked to by email. I talked to Jonathan Gray, who actually had the whistleblower information on that, because that was found in a coal mine in Russia, and then it was brought to the U.S., where they finally broke a code and got into it through frequencies. And Stewart, he was going to do a big a video expose on this. I guess you could call it ancient architect. And they stopped him, and he actually had to leave the country and go to, I believe he's in Indonesia somewhere now, but he had to leave the country.
Yeah, they don't want any of this stuff out, and there's, how do I word this? The ancients knew exactly, I think, what was going on, especially the early ones closest to Adam and Eve. In fact, in that, they mocked Adam and Eve. They found that the people were actually mocking Adam and Eve and calling them kind of nutcases because they actually believed in a creator. And, of course, nowadays, if you believe in a creator, you're kind of weird, and you're probably wearing a tinfoil hat and probably need to be sent away to a, what do you call those, padded cell, so you don't hurt yourself. Absolute denial is what we're coming into, but I believe we are going to have war everywhere, just like your friend said. Here's another headline. As tensions flare between the United States and Iran, more oil tankers are going dark in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, folks, that just simply means they're turning their transponders off, so they cannot be tracked. And I guess we are surveilling that whole region. Is that right, Larry, with jets?
Oh, the reports I've got, and this comes out of Debka File and then some reports from Hal Turner, indicate that we're using fighter jets armed with these mines that you can drop where we may possibly take out a number of the Iranian ships that have been trying to hijack these tankers. And at the same time, I've noted, too, I've seen information that Britain and a number of other countries have literally stopped now sending their ships through the Strait of Hormuz. They're trying to go another route, so it's very dangerous, and this could certainly start a war at any time, too.
Well, that's the problem, and if we have a war, guess what happens to the price of gasoline per gallon, folks? Now, an awful lot of people don't live in the cities where they work. They commute maybe 20, 30, even an hour, either way. I want you to think about that. If price of a gallon of gas goes to what Steve Quayle said he saw in a vision, $9.95 a gallon, it would totally destroy our economy. Just a word to the wise. What else you got, Larry, for news that you want to bring out?
Well, one thing we could talk about, you mentioned August the 4th, and Hal Turner put out a covert intel report that is now being backed up by mainstream media today, and it says China now within 72 hours of a declaration of martial law in Hong Kong said China to bring down martial law, a shutdown in Hong Kong on August the 4th. Now, when that came out, Stewart, I called you and talked to you about it, and then today it seems like Fox and a number of media reports are talking and parroting that same data, so there must be something to the report. And, by the way, there's also another report on Debka File I'd like your opinion on, because this is going on in the background, and people seem to be unaware of it. Debka File reporting that Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have begun quiet talks with Tehran, that's Iran, in an epic Gulf somersault for Trump. So basically what I've said when I tell you that headline is the fact that Trump apparently has MBS and the leader of the Arab Emirates actually in the background talking with the Iranians, trying to forestall I believe, an incident maybe in the Gulf of Hormuz. But will that work? I don't know.
Yeah, well, sooner or later it's going to break out, but you would hope that there's some delay. I mean, the Christians are kind of in a dilemma because you want the Lord to return and you want to get out of here, but at the same time you don't. And so you're kind of in that dilemma of watching but pretending that nothing's going to occur because the Lord said, occupy until I get back. So we are to occupy and just keep watching. But there's a lot of stuff going on in the background. Now, here's a headline. New York fire commissioners demand new 9/11 probe, citing overwhelming evidence of pre-planted explosives. What do you think of that one?
Well, I'm surprised it took them so long, Stewart. But anybody that would have said that early on in the investigations after 9/11, they were idiots or fools or liars.
Yeah. When that occurred, that very morning, I got a phone call from a fireman, or I think his brother. I'm not sure if he himself was a fireman. I think he was. But his brother was at the at the building, at the Twin Towers, and he said they pulled both of those buildings. We know for a fact they pulled building number 7 because the guy that owned building number 7 said right on TV, we pulled it. Now, when you use the word pulling, I'm sure most people have already seen these demolition experts that collapse a building so it goes straight down and doesn't fall over. And this is exactly what happened to the 9/11 Twin Towers. They came straight down. Kerosene fuel would not be hot enough to melt all the corners of the structure. Trump even made mention of that you'd be surprised, I think is how he worded it, as to who was behind 9/11 and the Twin Tower collapse. And it was right after the 9/11 pulling of those buildings. And somebody came out with a video showing, this is interesting, at the Pentagon, the place that they hit was naval intelligence at the Pentagon. The hole that made that in the Pentagon was not an airliner at all. Couldn't have been an airliner. It was a cruise missile that went in there and did that damage. Now somebody, I don't know, maybe he's got the courage now to come forward with it, shows a military airliner coming in, and then it pulls up and pulls away. They launched a missile. This whole thing was a scam, and it was done to make a police state in the United States, and they're going to have another one, a worse false flag. I think it's going to be horrendous false flag. The American people are being set up. They're going to fall for it. I mean, deep state doesn't have to worry about they're going to get found out. They aren't going to get found out. The masses of the people in the United States are going to fall for all this. They're going to accept the mark of the beast. They're probably going to willingly go do this. And just the way it is. You got to give credit where credit's due. Deep state is extremely intelligent. They know how to run psychological warfare. They've been doing it for a long, long time. When I was a captain on airplanes, I know one of the charters we took was with the Yes Group from Great Britain. And one of the lead guitarists would come up front, and he'd sit in the jump seat and talk to us. And it was nothing but psyops. It's all psychological warfare. They know exactly how to get a group of 20,000, 25,000 people And he said within the first couple of seconds, you got to get them. And he said, we're not playing to 20,000 people. We're not playing to 25,000 people. We're playing to one spirit. It's a unified spirit. This is what Hitler did. Stalin did it. Mayo did it. This is what leaders do. And it's satanic to its core, but that's how they operate. That's what they do. And, of course, the normal person doesn't know anything about it. They just, they flock to this or they flock to that. And Deep State knows all about it. They know how to run this, and they're running it very well. Satan knows more than probably the entire human race collected together. And he's had eons to figure out how the human brain works and how to dupe them into the matrix. It's amazing. Did you get, by the way, the second book on the Matrix?
Yes, I did. I appreciate it so much. And I was going to make a mention that they had Lou Dobbs had a member of the Border Patrol on today, and he was asking the Border Patrol if Trump months ago had gave orders that the border be secured and an emergency be utilized.
Yes.
Why is now, up to this point even, Homeland Security and ICE and all the agencies not doing their jobs? And the Border Patrolman said because the higher-ups in Homeland Security and all the agencies are rebelling against Trump and they will not follow his orders. So, Stewart, what I said on a show the other day, we were wondering why Trump doesn't get done what Trump orders done. The deep state refuses to follow his directives. They will not do it.
Well, deep state is too far entrenched. The American people allowed, in McCarthyism and communists, actually he was right. Not necessarily identifying everybody as a communist, but his basic premise was the communists have infiltrated the United States, and he was absolutely right. That's why you have your universities. They're graduating unknown communists. They don't even realize they're communists and socialists. And that's what's happening now at the university level. It's amazing what they've been able to accomplish. Very secretly, clandestinely, but nevertheless, they have accomplished it. And America's got to go down, just like the Bible says it has to go down. What else you got?
And I read.
Yeah,
I was going to say, Stewart, I read a real interesting piece yesterday from Michael Boldea. That's Dimitri Duduman's grandson, his interpreter. And the most recent one is he was wondering why the church in America cannot even think for themselves. He says they've been dumbed down so bad that the church in America hasn't got their own minds. They're just sitting there they're doing what they're being told. They can't even think individually.
Yeah, you would have thought that, when Homeland Security went into the churches and told the pastors, well, you're going to have to go into the concentration camps, into these FEMA Camp Troy, Hillary camps, and you're going to have to be, helping out husbands who have been separated from their wives and from their children. You're going to have to go in there and help them understand what's going on. You would have thought that when that occurred, pastors would have told those Homeland Security, you're nothing but a bunch of traitors. You're committing treason, and we, as Christians, will have nothing to do with you at all, and just thrown them out of their churches. What happened instead? They acquiesced to it. We've got a whole bunch of pastors who have committed treason against Jesus Christ himself and against every parishioner that attends their churches. It's incredible, the apostasy, and Michael is absolutely right. Satan has infiltrated the church, just like the Bible prophets said was going to happen. Having itching ears, they would turn their minds basically away from the truth and be taken over by fables and falsehoods. That's exactly what's happened. The salvation gospel's utterly false nowadays. They don't even know prophetically who they are or where they're living. It's absolutely incredible what's going on. And we have to admit, Satan basically has won. The deep state basically has won, at least for a short period of time. And then they go under total destruction themselves, and that's the sad part. I guess everybody dies. It's what happens to you after you die that people really ought to give some thought to, which we went into, by the way, in the frequency books. Proves it all. Here's a rabbi that said, we've got to build the temple. We've got to build the third temple. What do you think about that one, Larry? I mean, we got to be close if they're doing this openly now.
Well, I do find it interesting, Stewart, that, we talked about all of those signs, and then suddenly Trump became president right out of nowhere. Matter of fact, he was mocked, and it was a joke that he was even running for president. And then he became the president. And it's like I look back from here today where we are now, and you've got a deep state that won't even follow his orders. They won't do what he says, even though he's commander-in-chief. Apparently he can't enforce it. But I look at it now like something changed when Trump came in. It was like he stuck his foot in the door. The door of the New World Order was closing in on Babylon, and Jezebel was about to take the throne, and Trump stuck his foot in the door and stopped the whole thing. And we don't know how long his foot's going to be in the door, Stewart, but I really do find it interesting that the timeline changed a little at that point, and we've been given more time. Now, how long that'll last, I do not know. We're really coming up on a very critical time in history.
I think he'll be in until he finishes what he's supposed to do for Israel and his judgment phase on the United States, and then the Lord will remove him. Changing the subject just before we go, NASA researchers say we are heading towards a dangerous reversal of the planet's magnetic field with more cancers and electronic blackouts. Has everybody noticed what's going on with your computers, telephone glitches, et cetera, et cetera? It's all part of this magnetic reversal. And remember, from the ancient books, it seems to imply that a magnetic reversal precedes a crustal flip of the earth. And you had that vision of the white buffalo, and I remember what Red Elk said, about that. So,
yeah, and there was a partial. There was a partial shift in that vision I had, and it was only a warning of the approach of the big deal. And, of course, Red Elk totally stood by what I saw and said that's exactly accurate. And Stan Dale, even as he put up this article you just read from strangesounds.org, but the reversal is moving more quickly now.
Yeah, I think I think all this is going to come together much, much faster than people realized. Just like the destroyer back in those days, all the signs were there. They just did not recognize them for what they were. Deep state already knows this is coming. That's why they've gone underground. That's why they're moving here and there and everywhere to escape. They think they're going to escape. They should read the Bible. The Bible says, no, you're not going to escape. I don't care where you go. You can go to the depths of the ocean. You can go to the center of the earth. You can go to Mars. You can go to moon. I'm going to come and I'm going to get you. You are not going to escape the judgment of the Lord. So all these preparations are all part of the matrix. They think they're going to survive it, and they are not going to survive it. So I guess here we go. Any last word quickly, Larry?
Well, I would just say that people need to be very cautious during this time frame, and let's watch around August the 4th and see what comes up.
Yeah, this is going to be very, very interesting. Anyway, thanks a lot, folks, for listening. Take care, and heads up, your redemption obviously is drawing closer by the day. And we thank everybody for listening. Thank you, Larry. Talk to you later then. Good night, everyone.